Hello, Abnormal Investigations. Got another encounter for you today. This one, I believe it comes out of North Carolina. It's a rather longer one than what we usually do, but it sounds like a pretty good one, and I'm sure y'all will have a lot of ideas. If you have not checked out our other backup channel called AI Seeking the Truth, I would like to invite you to go over there. We're dropping videos over there, guys, and some of them are really out there. And I'd love to have you all over there. So if you haven't subscribed over there, I'd like to have you all over there. And that channel keeps growing. We'll keep doing it. We'll see how it does. But so far it's been growing. So I'd like to see you all over there. And don't forget the 8th coming up. We have Blake on from the Lost Cryptids Conservatory. He's going to be on live with us. So it's going to be an awesome night. And I hope to see you all there. In July of 2020, when I was 18 years old, my family and I lived in a small house just outside of town in the foothills of North Carolina. While we weren't deep in the wilderness, we might as well have been. Our house sat on the edge of a dense forest, surrounded by trees that stretched far into the mountains. From our front porch, you could just barely see the 2 5 minutes away trails. Occasionally, we could hear the distant hum of traffic or the barking of the neighbor's dog, but for the most part the stillness of the surrounding woods gave everything an eerie sense of isolation. We kept a few animals, chickens, goats, and a couple of cows, and the rhythms of rural life kept us busy. Most nights were peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes the world feel safe. But that night, the night I'll never forget, was anything but peaceful. The temperature had dropped unexpectedly that evening in the midst of July, when it should have been sweltering. The air turned frigid. It was 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It was way too cold for this time of year, especially in the south. The chill in the air was unnatural. A sharp bite in my skin, a prickle, as I felt as if the night itself had somehow grown colder, as if something was wrong. I was sitting in the living room, idly scrolling through my phone, when I realized I'd left my phone charger in the car. I debated going out for a second, but the thought of stepping into the unnatural cold nagged at me. Finally, I stood up, and I headed to the door. When I stepped outside, the frigid air hit me immediately. My breath misted in front of me. But it wasn't the typical summer night of coolness. It was bone-chilling cold. The kind of cold that sinks deep in your bones and doesn't let go. The silence around me was absolute. No crickets, no rustling of leaves, no distant sounds of town life. Nothing. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that makes you feel watched. As I walked down the porch and toward the car, something shattered that silence. The sound of the goats. Panicked, frantic, bleats that didn't sound right. They weren't the usual calls of hunger or curiosity. These were different. Sharp, desperate cries that echoed in the night. It was a kind of noise that made your blood almost curdle inside of you, sending a shiver all over you, listening. Something wasn't right. The goats sounded terrified, like they were running from something. "Mom," I called out, my voice cutting through the quiet. "The goats are freaking out." I quickly ran up to the second floor, my heart beginning to race. The closer I got to the window, the more panic in their voices rang in my ears. I didn't wait for a response. My stomach was already turning in knots. I grabbed my AR rifle, a weapon I was well trained with, but tonight I felt different. It felt like the weight of it was nothing compared to the weight of whatever was out there. Hard to explain, Mike. My hands trembled as I checked the magazine, chambered around, and clicked off the safety. Something about the air felt wrong. It was heavy. It was like it was pressing in from all sides. The best way I know to explain it, it was a heaviness. Almost like you were afraid or scared or waiting for something to happen, like you could feel it. I stepped back outside, my boots crunching on the gravel, and immediately the cold hit me again. The night seemed unnaturally dark, like it was holding its breath, waiting. As I jogged toward the goat pen, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. I know I keep saying this, but you just have to understand how I felt. Something beyond the goat's fear. The darkness, it felt alive. I couldn't explain why, but I knew I wasn't alone out there. When I reached the pen, I stood for a moment, scanning the area. The goats were huddled together, wide-eyed and shivering. But it wasn't just fear, it was panic. Their eyes were darting around as if they saw something. Something that I couldn't. I counted them to make sure they were all there, but that didn't make the dread in my stomach go away. The pen seemed too quiet now, and the deep, oppressive silence surrounded me. I walked to the perimeter of the pen, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. My boots crunched softly against the gravel as I checked for anything that might have spooked them. The distant sound of a dog barking in the neighborhood. A dog I'd heard countless times before, seemed far away, like the world had been stretched out. Maybe it was just my panic, the way I felt. The beam of my flashlight swept across the yard, catching nothing but the shadows of the trees and the occasional flicker of movement. But then, at the far end of the pen, I saw something. It wasn't an animal. It was something worse. At first, it was just a vague shape crouched low near the fence. I thought it was a deer, maybe a wild animal. But as the beam of light hit it, my breath caught. It was a figure, and it wasn't human. Not entirely. It was unnaturally thin. Its limbs were stretched out at odd angles. Its skin was pale, almost ghostly, and stretched so tightly over its bones that I could see the outline of its ribs. It was crouched low to the ground, its back arched in a way that made me just almost freak out. But its face, Mike, its face. Its face was the worst part. Where the face should have been, there was nothing. Just smooth, pale skin stretched across a blank space where its features should have been. No nose, no mouth. Just smooth, deathly skin. Its eyes were the color of milky, empty clouds, pale and unseen. But not that they looked wrong, they were just empty. The emptiness in them was far worse than any blindness. It felt like something was staring back at me from the pits of hell. I'd never been this afraid in my life. Mike, I couldn't even move. I couldn't even breathe. My chest was getting heavy. I was in a panic attack. My mind was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. I was frozen, my body paralyzed by the sight of this thing. It wasn't supposed to exist. It didn't even blink. It didn't even seem to breathe. It just watched. My heart pounding in my chest as I forced myself to raise my rifle. My hands were shaking violently, but I steadied the barrel, trying to focus. I reached for the safety. The second my finger touched the lever, the thing moved. Not walked, not ran. I'm talking, it kind of slid over into the brush and vanished just like that. One moment it was there, crouched, watching, and the next moment it was gone. There was no sound, no movement. It was like it dissolved into the darkness and into the grass. It slithered in like a snake would to disappear. It was so freaky looking, Mike, I can't even tell you. The shock hit me like a wave. I couldn't comprehend it. My legs finally moved, and I didn't think much. I just ran. My boots pounded the gravel, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was about to have an asthma attack or a panic attack. I wasn't sure which. But I didn't stop until I was inside, slamming the door behind me. My mother was in the living room, staring at me with wide, worried eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked. Her voice, I could tell. She was shaken. I couldn't even answer her. I couldn't tell her what I had just seen. "Everything's fine," I told her. I said in my voice. I was shaky and unconvincing, I know. But she didn't push me. She didn't need to. I could see in her eyes that she knew something was wrong, but neither of us dared to speak about it out loud. It's like the things that you hear. You don't talk about skinwalkers outside, Mike, when Sarah tells you to stop doing that when you're down there. I'm telling you, bro, there's something to that. I felt it. Later that night, as I tried to sleep, a noise broke the silence. It was a scream, a woman's scream, but twisted and distorted. It echoed through the trees, sending a wave of terror through me. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, some twisted cry from the forest, but deep down I knew better. I knew what I had seen. The next morning I grabbed my rifle, and I went to check on the goats. The sound of traffic from town was faint in the distance, and the barking of dogs from the neighbor's yard reminded me that I wasn't isolated as I sometimes felt. But as I heard the goat pen, but as I neared it, my heart sank. The dirt around the pen was disturbed like something had dragged itself through the ground, just as I had seen. As I walked the same path I had taken the night before, I froze. There, just past the fence, lay our goats. Its body was intact, but its head was gone, ripped clean off, like something I had never seen. I've never seen the head of any animal taken off the way this goat's head was removed. I'm telling you, whatever done this was inhuman and had inhuman strength, because it looked like it was just ripped off. The goat's head was missing, and we never found it. I stood there staring at the gruesome sight, feeling the chill come back into me. Whatever had come for us was still out there, and it was watching, waiting. It wasn't just a nightmare. This was real. I had really seen this last night. The inner parts of this animal was missing, Mike. It was almost like it was hollow. When I went to move it, I expected, any dead animal, that it would be kind of messy, but there was nothing. It's like the animal was hollowed out. I'd never seen anything like this. It was like it was a glove. Well, I didn't move. I couldn't. My mind was frozen in horror. My body was paralyzed again by the sight of this decapitated goat. The silence around me was oppressive, heavy with the weight of the unknown. I knew I had to get out of there, to get back to the safety of my house, but my legs wouldn't move. It was as if I was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. The image of the goat's headless body seared into my brain, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. And how could an animal be empty like that? How could it be hollow? I knew that I had to get out of that pen. I was starting to have another panic attack. I couldn't even stay in the pen with the goats. So slowly, I walked out of the pen, and I headed back to the house. When I got back to the house, I just could not get over the feeling of what I had just witnessed again. My mom asked me again when I walked in the door what was wrong, what had happened last night, and why was I so pale today. I took another deep breath and I tried to explain. I told them about the goat, about the decapitated body and the feeling of being watched all the time out there now. I told them about the thing I'd seen the night before and the thing with the pale skin and the empty eyes. As I spoke, I could see the fear growing in my mom and dad's eyes. They knew that something was wrong, something went beyond the ordinary that I'd seen. They knew that they were dealing with something evil, something that threatened our very lives. We sat in there in silence for a moment, trying to process what had happened. Then my father spoke up. He said, "We need to take precautionary things. We need to take precautionary methods. No more feeding at night, no more going out late at night, and we will always go in twos and we'll carry our gun." We started doing that. And ever since we started carrying the gun and going in twos, and Dad added lights out there, motion detectors like I've heard you say many times on your show, nothing else has happened. It's been calm, and I hope that it stays calm. Mike, don't say that name whenever you're out there. I really do feel there's something to it. There may not be, and it could have just been that night that this all happened that just kind of made me think it was all together, but there's something off about these things. Be safe, and I enjoy your content. You're the best. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, I think y'all done the right thing, and it seems to be working. Y'all haven't had another encounter. I'm sorry that you had to witness one of your animals done that way. That's never easy. And I've seen some white things standing out in the field myself at my granny's, so I know kind of how you felt. I don't know what they are. Well, I got a pretty good idea what they are, but I'm glad that y'all made it out of there and it's not happening now. That's the main thing. What do you all think, guys? What do you think, Abnormal Family? What happened to him? What did he encounter that night? Why was it there, and why was the animal hollow like that? Did it eat it? What do you think happened? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening, guys. Until next time, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner. And we'll see you on the next one. And if you don't mind, smash that like button for me on the way out. Thank you.